and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" Jesus looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." The word of God for the people of God.
Thank you, God.
Anybody here 12 years old? I think they're all in the back. What were you doing 12 years ago? Where were you 12 years ago? 12 years ago, I was in my second year of ministry here at Twin Pines Christian Church. 2006. We had a team of people who were working on creating a new vision statement for us that became building a community of disciples, becoming God's hands and touching lives through Christ. We were beginning to make foundational plans to have a capital campaign in 2007 that John Thompson would lead us in, to raise money to expand our facilities and build the Disciple Life Center. 12 years ago. It's a long time ago. 12 years ago. It's almost Rachel Hall's whole life. She 13?
Almost 14.
Oh, almost 14. Okay. Elisa's 12. It's Elisa's whole life. Ever been in pain for 12 years? Nobody saw this lady because for 12 years she had been the one that was bleeding, and nobody touched her because she was bleeding. She was in a state of constant ritual impurity for 12 years. Somebody who was no longer welcome at church because she was impure, and nothing could make her pure. I mean, this was some old pain this lady had. She'd been living with it for 12 years. She was untouchable, isolated from the rest of the world, unable to marry or bear children. She had old pain that so far had not been healed. She had spent every dollar that she had to get healing, and it still did not work. She had no more options. Old pain. You know, when you've been sick that long, you sort of reach a point of why bother? Nothing's ever going to, you ever feel that? Nothing's ever going to change. Why bother? Yeah, I see some head nodding out there. What do you think is the old pain that's stalling people at the threshold of function right now in our society? What have we been walking around with for at least 12 years or more, some of us? What are some of those old pains that stall people you know at the threshold of function? I got a few in mind. I'm just wondering if you know of a few things that might stall people at the threshold of function. I read about one of them on the front page of the paper this morning. Opioid addiction. Yeah? What else? Depression? Anxiety? Anybody got a financial debt that's 12 years old? I got one that's going on way more than that. It's called a house mortgage. We got one out there that's a 30-year mortgage. How about busyness? You ever feel like you've just been busy for 12 years or more and you're never going to get unbusy? Stress? I feel like I've been on a diet off and on for 12 years. How about you? I'm starting one today, July 1st, so I can lose 20 pounds before I get on the plane to Scotland. Health and wellness, exercise, weight, nutrition. Some of us got old pain in a relationship. A parent, a spouse, a brother, a sister, a neighbor, a friend, a child, a grandchild, a boss, a coworker. 12 years plus of old pain. Feels like you've done everything you can and nothing's going to change. Why bother? You know, I grew up thinking that racism was one of our old pains that we were finally getting rid of here in the United States. It's like we had a 12-year reprieve for a while there, only to find out, here we go again. It's a chronic problem. Old pain. Old wounds. Immigration. You know, every time I read the news, I think, are any of these old pains ever going to be healed? What are yours? What are the ones that concern you? Economy, trade, issues of war and justice. You know, yesterday at the booth, we had many, many people who loved our booth because we were giving away free water. And it was really hot. And some of them just wanted water. That's all they needed. But some of them were thirsty for something much more than water. They were parched from a 12-year plus old pain of being rejected. One of my favorite comments after I handed some water and some candy to some folks was, they saw our banner, and one of them says, "Wait, this is a church?" I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "My dad's a minister, and he accepts me, or he supports me, but he does not accept us. So I'm curious, tell me more about this church." I had another say, "Can I hug you? Because my God loves me. And I've never been told that by the church before. Thank you for being here." They were thirsty for acceptance and affirmation as much as they were for water. Plagued by old pain. Old pain. What does it take to gain independence from old pain? This is Independence Weekend, right? We're going to be celebrating July 4th on Wednesday. What does it take to gain independence from something that feels like it's never going to change? You know, I like this because I think we can take a clue from our founding fathers and mothers. They didn't like the taxation situation with Great Britain. They liked their tea, but they didn't like the taxes. And at some point, somebody somewhere said, "Aha, there's a connection here. We don't need that tea that bad. Let's throw it in the harbor. Let's get rid of that tea and get rid of these taxes." They had to make a change. Instead of just keep on drinking the same old tea and suffer the same old tax on and on and on forever and ever and just complain about it, they finally had to say, "You know what? I don't need this tea. I believe I'll get rid of it." That may be simplifying history a little bit, but I do think it's important to look and see that somebody said, we got to make a change. We got to get busy. We got to do something different to break this cycle. Got to do something different to break this cycle. One of my favorite rock bands is called Shinedown, and they have a song about drug addiction. And it's called Cut the Cord. And the song starts out with this chorus, freedom. Freedom, la 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 la, freedom. La 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 la, freedom. Let me tell you, I'm not passive aggressive. I'm going to be vicious. I've got my finger on the pulse. Victory is all you need, so cultivate and plant the seed. Hold your breath and count to 10. Just count to 10. Because agony brings no reward for one more hit and one last score. Don't be a casualty, cut the cord. And of course, it's a rock sound, so it's like, cut the cord! Over and over and over again. I love that song. I'm not somebody who's been plagued with opioid addiction, but I got other addictions like chips. And sugar, and bourbon, and just a few other things I like to enjoy that I don't know how to enjoy in moderation. If I could just learn to enjoy in moderation. Cut the cord. Freedom. I'm not going to be passive aggressive about it. I'm gonna do something. I'm going to look straight into it. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to make a change. Because this agony I'm in brings no reward. For one more hit and one last score, that one more chip sure does taste good. Don't be a casualty. Cut the cord. Throw the tea in the harbor. Do something. Now this lady, I recognize we're talking about a lady with a medical problem. And I'm the first one to say, when you got trouble, you need to go to the doctor. But the doctors weren't helping her. Now, either they couldn't cure her, or one suggestion is that she was part of a system that was corrupt. Profiteering physicians who exploited her pain without healing her. I don't know about you, I had a car, my first car that I ever had in my 20s. Every time I take it to the mechanic to get something fixed, and I get it back, and I swear to you, something else will break the next week. And I take it back, and they fix that, and then I'd get it home, and something else would break the next week. I mean, after a while, I'm like, are they breaking something when they're fixing something? You think people do that sometimes? I think they do. I don't know if that's what was happening to me. After a while, you know what? I quit going to that mechanic. Some people think that the reason Mark puts these two stories together about Jairus' 12-year-old daughter and this lady with this 12-year-old hemorrhage is that it's less a story about actual people, where there was this actual woman with a flow of blood and this actual girl who was laying on her deathbed, and maybe more of a symbolic story about Israel, about a people of God who are literally laying on their deathbed, be they leaders in the faith like Jairus, young and virile like this girl who's just about to pass puberty and become of childbearing age, but whose life is about to be snuffed out. Or whether they be like this woman, the people of Israel who are nameless, who are poverty-stricken because they've used all of their resources to get help and it isn't enough, and they're still at the bottom of the barrel, and they're still left out, invisible, overlooked, shut out from the people in the faith. And that Mark is trying to say, listen, God has a plan for us as a people. We don't have to be on our deathbed, and we don't have to be in a constant state of impurity and shut out any longer. Jesus does not seek out this woman to heal her. She seeks out Jesus. Everything else has not worked. And she knows that she's not supposed to touch anybody. She is impure. She's not supposed to be in the crowd in the first place, much less touch anyone. This woman, though nameless and powerless and penniless, Mark transforms into a woman of power by having her reach out and claim her dignity and her worth by reaching out to touch Jesus. She, at this moment in time, is going to cut the cord. She's not going to be stalled at the threshold of function anymore. She's going to throw the tea into the harbor. The disciples don't get it. All they see is a crowd. They see her as an inconvenience. Jesus is supposed to be going to the synagogue leader's house to help his daughter, and he stops to say, "Who touched me?" And they're like, "Are you kidding me? There are thousands of people here. Why do you even care who touched you?" But Mark shows us a Jesus who cares who touches him. He seeks to know the human face of the one who has been shut out, the one who no longer has any resources. And his power, his energy is transported into her, and she is healed. That flow of blood turns to a flow of life-giving energy by a simple touch. And I'm telling you, yesterday when that girl said to me, "Can I give you a hug?" I could feel the power of that life-surging energy between us. And I'm going to be honest with you. There's some people at the Pride Festival that I didn't really want to hug. There's some strange-looking folk there. They probably thought I was strange-looking. But man, what a powerful ministry to reach out and touch somebody who's felt untouchable. So I want to ask you today, what's your old pain? Where does this woman's story become your story? When have you been the bleeding one or the broken one? When have you been the excluded one or the invisible one? When have you been the marginalized one or the one who's had your pain so long that you don't even know how much of it is a part of you anymore? The one codependent with your pain because it's all you know. And if not you, who? Who do you know that's been the bleeding one, the broken one, the excluded one, the invisible one, the marginalized one, the codependent one? You know, I have to admit, in the more progressive churches, we often don't take Jesus as healer seriously. And that's a shame. Because I guarantee you that Jesus brings healing even in times when there are not always physical cures. Imagine the implications if we seriously accept Jesus as a healer of those thresholds, those old pains that stall us at the threshold of function. In a lot of ways, for people of faith, any day with Jesus is always Independence Day. Today is always Independence Day. Today, you can always choose to cut the cord, to throw the tea in the harbor, to reach out and touch, to change something, to do something different, to get out of that cycle of old pain. Imagine yourself for a moment as this woman reaching out to touch Jesus' cloak. Now here's the kicker. After she touched him, he asked her if she's the one that touched him. And she told him the whole truth. Actually, he didn't ask her, but he asked who touched me. And she told him the whole truth. You see, it's not just reaching out and touching, but it's also sharing your brokenness with God and trusting God's healing power to be present even as you help tell the whole truth of your pain. What threshold do you have to cross in your life right now to claim your own dignity and worth as a child of God? What thresholds do we as a church need to cross to be in solidarity with those in our world who are nameless and powerless and penniless and literally bleeding out in the world today? Those are my questions for you today. That's why we have glamours on the doorway. As you come in and as you go out throughout this series, to identify what those thresholds are for you and for our world. It's why I am going on sabbatical. As I look not only for thin places where I can experience the blessing of God's presence, but also some thin places where I can sit down and reach out to God and tell God the whole truth of my pain. I'm really excited about sabbatical, but not that part. I've told many of you, I know when I return there are going to be some things that I have to change about myself, personally and as a pastor. And some of those changes are going to be fun, and some of them are not going to be fun. Some are going to be hard. But I'm ready. I'm kind of like Van Morrison, okay? I'm tired of standing in the darkness. I'm waiting at the door. I'm a dweller on the threshold. I'm waiting at the door. I'm standing in the darkness. I don't want to wait no more. I want to pierce this veil of glamour and find out just who I am. I want to face old pain and find an opportunity for growth in it. And I invite you to do the same. Join me in being a dweller on the threshold these next few weeks. Join me in piercing the glamours that stall you at the threshold of function and keep you from seeing and being who you really are. And on our blessing board, maybe write some prayers to experience God's blessing and the thresholds of life.